On our long-awaited family trip to the Aspen Pines Lodge, Mark dropped a bombshell that shattered my world. "I booked suites for me, Lauren, and the kids," he said with a smirk, his voice cold as the mountain air. "She's my true love, Sarah." I forced a tight smile, said nothing, and walked away. Hours later, ignoring his calls, I set in motion something he'd never see coming. My silence was just the beginning. I stood in the lodge's cedar-scented lobby, surrounded by our scattered luggage, feeling like a stranger in the vacation I'd spent months planning. The kids, Emma, 9, Liam, 13, and Noah, 17, stood nearby, their faces a mix of confusion and unease. The snow-dusted peaks visible through the towering windows mocked the warmth I'd envisioned for this trip. Mark's words hit like a slap, freezing me in place. "Not for you," he'd added, eyes glued to his phone, as if I were an afterthought. Lauren emerged from the gift shop, her sleek ski jacket hugging her frame, her auburn hair catching the chandelier's glow. She glided toward us, her confidence a stark contrast to my unraveling composure. "Mark, darling," she purred, her hand grazing his arm, "did you tell her about our arrangements?" The lobby buzzed with happy families checking in, their laughter a cruel backdrop to my humiliation. I felt like a ghost in my own life. "Mom?" Emma's small voice broke through, her brown eyes searching mine. She sensed the tension but couldn't grasp its weight. Liam shifted uncomfortably, his teenage frame rigid with unspoken loyalty. Noah, lost in his phone, glanced up, his jaw tight. Mark ignored them, signing check-in forms with a flourish. "Sarah will sort herself out," he said dismissively, handing Lauren's designer duffel to me. "Room 305, please." The bag felt heavy in my hands, a symbol of my demotion to servant. Every fiber screamed to throw it back, to scream, to reclaim my dignity in this polished pine battleground. Instead, I took it, my silence louder than any outburst. "Sarah's so good at handling things," Mark said to Lauren, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Always putting others first." The kids watched, Emma tugging my sleeve, Liam clearing his throat, Noah typing furiously. I met their eyes, memorizing their worry, then turned away. In that moment, my silence wasn't surrender, it was the first step in a plan Mark would never anticipate. As I walked toward the elevator, his voice called after me, but I let it fade. This was no longer his story to control. The Aspen Pines Lodge glowed with warmth, its stone fireplace crackling, fairy lights twinkling across the vaulted ceiling. Families laughed over hot cocoa, their ski boots clattering as they planned their day on the slopes. But for me, Sarah, the lodge was a stage for my unraveling. Mark and Lauren sat at a candlelit table in the lodge's upscale restaurant, their hands intertwined, while I sat with our children, Emma, Liam, and Noah, feeling like an outsider in my own family. The panoramic windows framed moonlit peaks, but the beauty only deepened the sting of Mark's betrayal. Mark ordered a bottle of wine, his voice loud enough to carry. "Lauren deserves the best," he said, winking at her while ignoring the kids' uneasy glances. Emma fidgeted with her napkin, her small fingers twisting the cloth into knots. Liam's eyes darted between his father and me, his teenage loyalty torn. Noah, usually glued to his phone, set it down, his jaw clenched as he watched Lauren lean into Mark, her laughter sharp and performative. The waiter placed a steaming plate of elk medallions before me, a dish I'd chosen months ago when planning this trip. I'd spent hours curating every detail, lift tickets, spa appointments, even the kids' favorite desserts on the menu. Now, Mark acted as if he'd orchestrated it all. "Sarah's always been so practical," he said to Lauren, his tone dripping with condescension. "Like a good assistant, keeping things running." Lauren giggled, her manicured nails tapping her wineglass. "Oh, Mark, you're too kind to keep her around." Their words landed like stones, each one heavier than the last. Nearby diners glanced over, sensing the tension. A couple at the next table exchanged whispers, their pity palpable. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, the familiar burn of humiliation Mark had perfected over years of subtle jabs. "Dad," Liam started, his voice cracking. "Why are you?" Mark cut him off with a laugh. "Lighten up, kid. It's just a joke." Your mom gets it. He looked at me, expecting me to play along, to smile through the degradation as I had so many times before. Emma's eyes widened, searching my face for reassurance. Noah's fork hovered midair, his knuckles white. The restaurant's chatter seemed to hush, as if waiting for my response. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. Instead, I folded my napkin with deliberate care, placing it beside my untouched plate. The scrape of my chair against the hardwood floor echoed as I stood. Mark's brow furrowed, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. Lauren's smile faltered, her hand tightening on Mark's arm. I looked at my children, their faces a mix of worry and confusion, and then at Mark, his smugness cracking under my gaze. Without a word, I turned and walked toward the exit, my footsteps steady despite the weight in my chest. The restaurant's warmth faded behind me, replaced by the cool bite of the lobby's air. Mark's voice called after me, but I didn't turn back. In the elevator, my phone buzzed relentlessly, Mark's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring, each unanswered call a brick in the wall I was building. By the time I reached the hallway to the single room I'd booked for myself, the phone was silent, powered off in my pocket. The lodge's luxury mocked my isolation, but as I stepped into my room, a clarity settled over me. Mark thought he'd diminished me, reduced me to a footnote in his new life with Lauren. He was wrong. My silence wasn't weakness, it was a weapon, honed and ready. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mountain view sprawling before me, and opened my laptop. Mark had always bragged about his business acumen, his success, his control. But he'd forgotten one critical detail: every account, every property, every piece of his empire was in my name. I'd been the one signing the papers, managing the finances, building the foundation while he took the credit. Tonight, that oversight would cost him. As the moon cast shadows across my room, I logged into our accounts, my fingers steady. Mark's calls had stopped, but his reckoning was just beginning. The restaurant scene replayed in my mind, not the humiliation, but the look in my children's eyes. They'd seen the truth, even if they didn't fully understand it yet. My silence would speak louder than any argument, and it would echo through every choice I made next. In the quiet of my single room at the Aspen Pines Lodge, paid for with my own credit card, I sat at the small desk, the glow of my laptop illuminating the path to my freedom. The mountain view outside was serene, but inside, I was a storm of purpose. Mark's betrayal in the lobby, announcing suites for him, Lauren, and the kids, excluding me, had been a calculated move to humiliate me. But his arrogance had blinded him to the truth. I held the keys to our financial empire, and my silence was about to rewrite his story. I logged into our accounts, the ones Mark assumed he controlled. Years ago, for tax purposes, I'd placed everything: bank accounts, investment portfolios, even his precious consulting firm, in my name. He'd been too busy playing the mogul to notice, signing where I pointed, trusting my practical nature. Now, that trust would be his undoing. I started with the investment portfolio, $82,000 in stocks and bonds, transferred to my personal account with a few clicks. The vacation cabin we owned nearby, which Mark loved to boast about at cocktail parties, was titled solely to me. I initiated paperwork to secure it as mine alone. My phone, now powered off, lay silent on the bed. Mark had called 19 times since dinner, each unanswered ring fueling my resolve. I dialed Diane, my attorney, on her emergency line. "Sarah, it's past midnight," she said, her voice groggy but sharpening as I explained Mark's public betrayal and Lauren's role. "I need legal separation papers drafted tonight," I said. "And I want to protect my assets before he realizes what's happening." Diane's keyboard clicked as she took notes. "We'll need documentation of his behavior, financial records, and a strategy to freeze him out. How fast do you want this?" My answer was firm: immediately. "Serve him before he can counter." She promised preliminary documents by morning, and I hung up, my focus returning to the laptop. The business accounts were next. Mark's consulting firm, his pride and joy, was an LLC I'd established. Every contract, every client payment, every tax filing had my signature. He'd schmoozed clients while I handled the paperwork, invisible but indispensable. I redirected the firm's operating funds to a new account he couldn't access. By 2 a.m., I'd frozen his access to joint credit cards, rerouting automatic payments for his car lease and club memberships to accounts in my name. The kids' faces, Emma's confusion, Liam's torn loyalty, Noah's quiet anger, haunted me. They didn't understand yet, but they would. Mark's dismissal of me as practical had been a lie he told himself, and now it would unravel him. I paused, staring at the cabin's deed on my screen. This wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming the life I'd built while Mark took the spotlight. A knock at the door startled me. It was Noah, his 17-year-old frame slouched, eyes red. "Mom, why didn't you fight back at dinner?" he asked, his voice low. I studied him, seeing the boy who used to confide in me during late-night talks. "Sometimes, Noah, silence is stronger than words," I said. He nodded, unsure but trusting, and left. His visit reminded me why I was doing this, not just for me, but for them. By dawn, I'd locked Mark out of the financial world he thought he owned. Diane texted, papers drafted. Service planned for tomorrow at his coffee shop meeting. I closed my laptop, the room's silence no longer oppressive but empowering. Mark's calls had stopped, but his panic was just beginning. He'd underestimated me, thinking I was just the woman who carried Lauren's bag. Soon, he'd learn I'd been carrying his entire life. The morning sun filtered through the lodge's curtains as I sipped coffee, my laptop open to the final stages of dismantling Mark's world. Last night, I'd transferred investments and secured properties, all in my name. Now, I targeted the smaller details, credit cards, utilities, subscriptions, that kept Mark's life running smoothly. He'd always called himself the provider, but I'd been the one ensuring the bills were paid, the accounts balanced, the empire intact. My silence, which he mistook for defeat, was about to cost him everything. I canceled his personal credit cards first, the ones he used for lavish lunches and designer suits. The gym membership he flaunted, the streaming services he binged while ignoring the kids, all disconnected. The lease on his Tesla, which I'd quietly paid for 2 years, was rerouted to an account he couldn't touch. Each click felt like a surgical incision, precise and deliberate, severing the lifelines he'd taken for granted. Downstairs in the lodge's lobby, Mark faced the first consequences. I'd positioned myself near the coffee bar, blending into the morning crowd of skiers and families. Mark stood at the front desk, his face flushed, arguing with the clerk. "There's no way my card was declined," he insisted, swiping it again. The clerk's polite smile didn't waver. "Sir, it says insufficient funds. Do you have another card?" Lauren hovered nearby, her designer ski boots clicking impatiently. "Try mine," she offered, her voice tight. The clerk swiped her card, then shook her head. "Also declined, ma'am." Mark's jaw dropped, his confidence crumbling as other guests began to stare. Emma, Liam, and Noah stood to the side, their faces a mix of embarrassment and confusion. Liam whispered something to Emma, who clutched her stuffed bunny tighter. Mark pulled out his phone, dialing his bank with trembling hands. I couldn't hear the conversation, but his ashen expression told me everything. The accounts he thought were his were empty or inaccessible, locked by my late-night maneuvers. "This is impossible," he muttered, his voice rising. "I'm a successful consultant." The clerk suggested he contact his bank again, her tone professional but firm. Security lingered nearby, ready to intervene. I sipped my coffee, my heart steady despite the chaos unfolding. Mark's empire was a house of cards, built on my signatures, my credit, my work. He'd never questioned how the bills were paid, how the cabin was purchased, how his firm stayed afloat. Now, he was learning the hard way. The kids caught my eye, their expressions shifting. Noah's usual scowl softened, as if piecing together the puzzle. Liam's shoulders slumped, his loyalty to his father fraying. Emma's small hand reached for Noah's, seeking stability. They were beginning to see what Mark had obscured. Their mother wasn't just the woman who packed their lunches or planned their vacations. She was the foundation of their world. Mark's voice cracked as he pleaded with the clerk. There's been a mistake. Run it again. But there was no mistake, only the consequences of his arrogance. Lauren's face twisted with irritation, her earlier confidence replaced by panic. She whispered something to Mark, then stormed off toward the gift shop, her heels echoing across the pine floor. I slipped away before Mark could spot me, returning to my room to finalize the last transfers. The business account for his consulting firm, $47,000 in working capital, was now in my control. The cabin's title transfer was complete, ensuring he'd have no claim. Diane texted, papers ready. He'll be served at his coffee shop tomorrow at 9 a.m. I closed my laptop, the weight of my actions settling over me. This wasn't revenge, it was justice, delivered in silence. As I packed my bags, I thought of the kids. They deserved more than Mark's lies and Lauren's shallow presence. My silence wasn't just dismantling Mark's world, it was clearing space for the truth to reach them. Mark's public humiliation at the desk was only the beginning. By the time he realized the full scope of my power, I'd already begun, building a new life where his betrayal couldn't touch us. 3 days after the lodge debacle, I sat in my temporary apartment, a small space I'd rented with my own savings. The silence I'd chosen wasn't abandonment, it was space for my children to see the truth. Emma, Liam, and Noah deserved to know the mother who'd been erased by Mark's lies. I opened my laptop and wrote letters to each of them, pouring out memories of love and sacrifice, slipping mementos into envelopes to remind them who I was. For Emma, I wrote about the night she'd fallen off her scooter, her knee bloody, and how I'd sat with her in the ER, reading her favorite fairy tale until she slept. I included a tiny locket she'd made me at 6, painted with wobbly hearts, which I'd kept in my jewelry box. For Liam, I recalled the summer he'd struggled with reading, how we'd spent nights decoding books until he beamed with pride. I tucked in his first spelling bee certificate, the one Mark had dismissed as cute. For Noah, I wrote about the time he'd lost his debate tournament and I'd driven him to the lake, listening as he poured out his fears. His old debate team pin, which he thought he'd lost, went into his envelope. I drove to their school, handing the letters to Mrs. Carter, the office secretary who'd known us for years. Make sure they get these, I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. She nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. They've been asking about you, Sarah. Days later, Liam called from a friend's phone, his voice thick with tears. Mom, I read your letter. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how much you did for us. He told me about the chaos at home. Lauren had moved in, tossing out family photos, rearranging furniture, trying to erase me. But the kids weren't fooled. Emma had found a scrapbook I'd made, filled with their baby pictures, and cried herself to sleep. Noah had discovered my old journal, detailing late nights helping with his projects while Mark was too busy. Lauren doesn't care about us, Liam whispered. She yells when Emma cries, tells Noah to stop talking about college. Dad says she's better for us, but it's all wrong. My heart broke, but it also swelled, they were seeing the truth. Emma's small voice came through during another call, Mama, I found your locket. Why didn't you tell us Dad was lying? I explained they were children, not meant to carry adult burdens, but I'd never stopped loving them. Noah showed up at my apartment one evening, soaked from a sudden rain. I read your journal, he said, his 17-year-old voice raw. You gave up a job offer to stay home for us. Dad said you were lazy. He handed me the journal, pages dog-eared where I'd written about missing a promotion to be there for his debate practices. I hugged him, feeling his walls crumble. The breaking point came at Emma's school play. I watched from the back, unseen, as Mark and Lauren arrived late, arguing loudly. Emma scanned the audience for me, her face falling when she saw only them. After her performance, she ran to Noah, whispering, I want Mama Sarah. That night, they walked to my apartment, Emma clutching her locket, Liam carrying his certificate, Noah with my journal. We're not going back, Noah said, his voice firm. We choose you. I held them close, their warmth filling the void Mark had left. My silence hadn't been weakness, It had given them space to see the mother they'd forgotten, the one who'd built their world with love. As they settled onto my couch, I knew we were starting over, together. The process server found Mark at his favorite coffee shop in downtown Aspen, where he held his Thursday morning power meetings. I'd told Diane exactly where he'd be, same table, same time, every week for years. His predictability, once an annoyance, was now my advantage. At 9:03 a.m., a young man in a wrinkled suit approached Mark's table, where he sat pitching to a new client, his laptop open, exuding false confidence. "Mark Reynolds, you've been served," the server said, dropping a manila envelope onto his keyboard. Mark's face drained of color as he scanned the separation papers, Diane's work meticulous and merciless. Asset freezes, business dissolution, legal separation, every account, every property, every piece of his life was locked away, tied to my name. The client, a middle-aged man with a briefcase, excused himself, sensing the collapse of Mark's facade. Mark's voice shook as he muttered, "This can't be right," but the truth was undeniable, his empire was mine. Lauren's departure came swiftly. Her credit cards, tied to accounts I'd frozen, were useless. She'd been job hunting since the lodge's declined card fiasco, and Diane confirmed she'd left for a sales job in Denver, abandoning Mark when his wealth vanished. He was alone now, his calls to me unanswered, my new number a secret he couldn't crack. The kids had chosen me that rainy night, their bags packed with my letters and mementos. Emma clung to her locket, Liam to his certificate, Noah to my journal. "We're staying with you," Noah said, his 17-year-old resolve unshakable. At my apartment, we talked for hours, their questions spilling out, why I'd stayed silent, how I'd endured Mark's lies. I explained that my silence wasn't weakness but a shield, protecting them until they could see the truth. Mark's desperation grew. He called mutual friends, my old coworkers, even my sister, begging for my whereabouts. "She won't talk to me," he told his brother, unaware Noah overheard. "How do I fix this?" But there was no fixing it, my silence had exposed him. The kids told me about his unraveling, the unwashed dishes, the empty fridge, the way he shouted at Lauren's absence. They saw what I'd hidden for years, their father's emptiness without my support. In my apartment, I reflected on the power of my silence. It hadn't been about revenge but reclamation, of my dignity, my children's trust, my life. Mark had called me practical, a background player, but I'd been the architect of his world. Now, that world was crumbling, and mine was rising. The kids slept in my spare room, their soft breaths a reminder of why I'd fought. My silence had given them clarity, and in choosing me, they'd given me purpose. As Diane finalized the legal proceedings, I prepared for our next chapter. Mark's coffee shop humiliation was just one moment in a larger reckoning. My silence had spoken louder than his boasts, and it would carry us forward, into a life he could no longer touch. 6 months after the lodge, I stood in the kitchen of our new home, a modest 3-bedroom ranch in a neighboring school district, bought with my savings. The wood floors creaked underfoot, the white walls glowed with morning light, and the kids' laughter filled the air. Emma, now 9, danced around with a paint roller, her cheeks streaked with lavender. "Mom, can my room be all purple?" she asked, her eyes bright with possibility. "Every inch," I promised, dipping my brush into a can of silver paint for the star accents she wanted. Liam and Noah shared the larger bedroom, not out of necessity but choice. "We've got time to make up," Noah said, his 17-year-old voice softer now, free from the tension of Mark's house. We'd spent the weekend painting, music blaring from Liam's phone, until paint splattered Noah's hair, and we collapsed in giggles. These moments, simple, unguarded, felt like miracles after years of navigating Mark's moods. The house wasn't grand like the one I'd lost to Mark's betrayal, but it was ours. I'd turned the garage into an office, reviving my consulting practice. Clients who'd once dealt with Mark now called me directly. "Sarah, we always knew you were the brains," said Rachel, a former client who'd seen through Mark's flash. My phone buzzed with opportunities, my expertise no longer hidden behind his name. Contrast that with Mark's new reality. Diane had informed me of his eviction from our old house, the mortgage unpaid once I froze the accounts. He'd moved into a cramped studio apartment, its peeling paint and noisy neighbors a far cry from the luxury he'd flaunted. His Tesla was gone, repossessed after I stopped the payments. He drove a beat-up sedan now, its engine sputtering like his fading confidence. Lauren was long gone, her Denver job a convenient escape when Mark's wealth dried up. The kids thrived in our new home. Emma's room became a purple haven, her artwork pinned to the walls. Liam joined the soccer team, his confidence growing with every goal. Noah, preparing for college, spent evenings with me, discussing his dreams over coffee. They'd found my old journals, scrapbooks, and mementos, each discovery a reminder of my love. "You were always there," Liam said one night, holding a photo from his first soccer game, me cheering in the stands while Mark was at a meeting. We planted a garden in the backyard, a chaotic mix of vegetables and wildflowers. Emma knelt in the dirt, her hands muddy, laughing as Noah teased her about her crooked rows. Liam documented it on his phone, promising a family vlog. These were the moments I'd fought for, the ones Mark had dismissed as mundane. They were everything. I composed a final communication for Mark, a 42-page document detailing every financial and emotional contribution I'd made over 14 years. Mortgage payments for the house he'd called his, $920,000, all from my accounts. Car leases he'd driven, $139,000. His firm's expenses, travel, dinners, memberships, $78,000, paid by me. The non-monetary costs were heavier, 2,400 hours of unpaid work for his business, 183 school events attended alone, 97 nights comforting the kids during his work trips. The final page read, "My silence wasn't surrender. It was my strength, hidden from you." I mailed it certified to his studio, the tracking confirming he signed for it at 3:15 p.m. on a Wednesday. He never responded. Noah later said Mark had called him, voice trembling, trying to justify the numbers. "He said you were cruel," Noah told me as we walked our new neighborhood, Emma chasing fireflies ahead. "But I read it, Mom. It was just the truth." Mark's world had shrunk to his small apartment, where he woke to the sound of arguing neighbors. My world had expanded, filled with the kids' laughter, the smell of fresh paint, the promise of a life rebuilt. My silence had carved out space for us to thrive, free from his shadow. As we finished the garden, Emma planted a sunflower seed, whispering, "This one's for you, Mama Sarah." I held her close, knowing we'd grown something far stronger than Mark's lies. Section 8, Conclusion and Reflection, 200 words. My silence transformed me from a humiliated wife into a woman reclaimed. By saying nothing, I let Mark's lies collapse under their own weight, revealing the truth to Emma, Liam, and Noah. In our new home, we built a life of laughter and love, purple walls, messy gardens, late-night talks, free from his control. Mark, alone in his dim apartment, faced the silence he'd once imposed on me, his world reduced to echoes of a life he thought he owned. The kids thrived, their trust in me a testament to the power of quiet strength. Emma's drawings covered our fridge, Liam's soccer trophies lined the shelf, and Noah's college applications promised a future unshackled by Mark's shadow. My silence hadn't been weakness, it was a beacon, guiding them home. If this story of silent strength resonated, hit that like button. My favorite moment was Sarah dismantling Mark's empire from her lodge room, turning his betrayal into her triumph. What was yours? The kids' rainy walk to her? The coffee shop reckoning? That final document of truth? Share below and subscribe for more stories of resilience.